Hello everybody, this is Good Witch Katje. Soon it will be Halloween. In honor of that, I wanted to tell a story tonight and let the story speak for itself. So once upon a time, there was a boy named Kyle, and Kyle went to spend the summer with his grandparents, who had a farm out in the country. So when Kyle went there, he had a good time, and at first he didn't know anybody, but eventually he made friends with a girl named Ruth, who lived at another farm maybe a mile or so away from his grandparents' homestead. So Kyle and Ruth became very good friends, and every day they would meet at a pond between the two farms and spend the rest of the day playing hide and seek, or fishing, or climbing trees, all the things that children like to do during the summer in the country. One day, Kyle went to the pond to meet Ruth, and she didn't show up. It turned out later that Ruth had gone the day before, later in the afternoon. Ruth had gone to watch a softball game at a local school. She had sat on bleachers overlooking the field to watch this game. During the course of the game, Ruth became very sick. She began to feel dizzy, she began to feel feverish, and eventually she passed out, so that the people around her, the townspeople around her, had to take her to the doctor, where she briefly recovered consciousness for just a minute, and told them that while she had been sitting there watching this game, at one point she had put her hand under the seat of the bleacher and she felt something sting her middle finger. At that point, the doctor and the townspeople realized that she had probably been bitten by something. So they left Ruth with the doctor, who began to treat her and waited to see what the people found out. The townspeople went back to the baseball field at the school, the softball field. They looked under the bleacher seat where Ruth had been sitting, and sure enough, there was a mature female black widow spider right there under this bleacher seat. So that what had happened was she had put her hand under there and the spider had bitten her on her finger. Sure enough, the doctor found on her middle finger a telltale sign, a red mark, a prick mark, where the spider, the fangs had gone into her finger. So the townspeople were looking at this spider, and they didn't know what to do, but the more they looked at it, they decided that they wanted to kill it. Not simply because the spider had bitten the child, but as the townspeople looked at this beautiful creature, nevertheless, they saw something dark and sinister in the spider that they felt reflected something dark and sinister in them. Many of them were not happy. Many of them were very angry and intolerant about a number of different things. And so they proceeded to kill the black widow spider. Eventually, Ruth got better after the doctor had treated her for the spider bite, so that she and Kyle resumed playing together for the rest of the summer. At one point, Ruth came over to Kyle's grandparents to play with him in the front yard. And in the front yard where Kyle's grandparents lived on the farm, there was a cast iron cauldron, a pot, where Kyle's grandmother many years ago had made lye soap, and she had also washed the family clothes in this pot before she had a washing machine. So the pot, this cast iron pot, was turned upside down in the yard. Both Kyle and Ruth were fascinated by it. Eventually, Kyle's curiosity got the better of him, and so he decided to turn the pot over to see what was inside. Doing so, what he did was he put his hand under the rim of the pot, grasped it, and then he turned the pot over so that he and Ruth could look down into the cauldron of it. And sure enough, maybe about an inch away from where he had grasped the pot with his hand near his thumb, there was a black widow spider Again, it was a mature female black widow spider with a beautiful glossy body, and it also had the telltale vividly red hourglass on the stomach. So if Kyle's finger had been any closer to this spider, he too, like Ruth, would have been bitten. But as Kyle looked at the spider, he too saw something in it that reflected an aspect of him. Only this time, what he saw was something positive. Whatever it was, and he didn't fully understand it, there was something in this beautiful, feminine, dark, black creature with this vividly red hourglass on itself, on its stomach, that reflected an aspect of who he was, a secret aspect that he didn't fully understand yet, but it was something that he wanted to protect. So unlike the townspeople who had killed the spider that had bitten Ruth, Kyle decided to let this spider go. So he and Ruth stepped back, and eventually the spider crawled out of the cauldron into the leaves and away into the forest, where it disappeared. So many years passed after that. Ruth and Kyle grew older. Maybe at this point in the story, they grew up to where maybe Kyle and Ruth were both in their late teenage years, or maybe in their early 20s, and both of them went to the city. They were both living in the city. While Kyle was in the city, he began to accept the fact that he was had a feminine side, and that he wanted to express himself as a woman, as a girl, so he began to dress as a girl. And when he did so, he tended to wear black clothes, shiny black clothes, not unlike what I'm wearing tonight, because he remembered that spider that he had seen in the cauldron all those years ago with this beautiful, feminine, glossy body, and he realized that that shiny, glossy body was reflecting that part of himself. So in honor of that, he began to dress as almost like the Black Widow that he'd seen all those years ago. But he only did it in secret. He did not do it very often, and when he did so, he would not really go much out in public. Sometimes he would walk in the park in the city. Sometimes he would go to a parking lot or somewhere where there weren't a lot of people. Maybe it would be at night, so that he would have this opportunity to express this feminine side of himself in this way. At one point, though, one night when he did this, some of the townspeople, or maybe there were people like that who were, except they were living in the city, they saw Kyle, who was now calling himself or herself Kyla. So they saw Kyla dressed as a girl. They didn't like it very much because, like the townspeople all those years ago, they were very angry and intolerant. There was something very negative about them. So when they saw Kyla in the park, they began to chase her because they wanted to hurt her or do something bad to her. So Kyla began to run. She didn't know where to go, so she ran toward an apartment complex, and she climbed up the stairwell, and the people who were chasing her, she was able to get around the corner, so they didn't see exactly where she went. She went up the stairwell and knocked on the first apartment door that she came to, and the person who opened it, lo and behold, was Ruth. Many, many years later, Ruth had also moved to the city and was now living in this apartment complex behind the very door that Kyla had knocked on. So Ruth opened the door, and she saw this person standing there, and immediately she recognized that it was Kyle. Even though Kyle was now Kyla and dressed as a girl, Ruth recognized her friend from all those years ago, all those summers ago, during that summer very long ago. She saw this, and she remembered the two of them, the spider, the Black Widow spider that the two of them had seen in the cauldron, and for the first time, maybe in a long time, she also remembered that there was something very special about that, and she could see that that was reflected in Kyle now. Kyla. She could see that this part of Kyla was had been in the spider a long time ago that they had let go. And so because of that, she decided to protect Kyla. She let Kyla into the apartment, shut the door, so that the people who were chasing Kyla went on and didn't know what happened to her. Kyla was safe, Ruth was safe. So the moral of the story, if there is one, is that here we have different individuals who are seeing something reflected in a spider. Sometimes it's something positive about themselves that they are seeing reflected in it that needs to be protected and safeguarded. Sometimes it's something negative, but the spider is always the same. And the spider has this power to bring out things about people, to show things about people to themselves in a way that is very revealing. So that's my story. I hope you enjoyed it. I wish everybody a good and restful evening. I'm looking forward to Halloween. So until then, until next time, this is Good Witch Katje, thanking you for spending some time with me. And I look forward to talking to you next time. I'll model this outfit just a little bit more for you before I say goodnight. Good night, everybody.